Welcome, everyone. I'm Mariquita Solis, the live stream host of all-creatures.org. All-creatures.org was founded in 1998 and is a leading resource for faith-based animal rights veganism. Led by Executive Director Tams Nicholson, we provide free resources for people seeking to live compassionately towards all creatures. Our extensive library includes vegan sermons and commentaries, animal rights strategies, action alerts, events, and works by various vegan authors. We also sponsor websites for animal rights organizations. Our mission is to unite compassionate individuals worldwide who honor the dignity of all creatures. I'm excited today because we're very honored to welcome my good friend, Angela Crawford, Ph.D. Angela brings her background in psychology to empower people towards plant-powered living for greater physical and emotional well-being. She's the author of The Vegan Transformation, A Journey to Heal Yourself and the World. As a vegan lifestyle educator, she offers courses and resources to thrive with a plant-based lifestyle. She speaks at Veg Fests, writes articles, and teaches about the connection between food and mood, overcoming barriers to healthy lifestyle change, thriving emotionally and socially as a vegan, and values alignment and compassion. Her YouTube channel, at the Vegan Transformation, shares inspiring interviews and insights for flourishing with a plant-powered vegan lifestyle. She holds a doctorate in clinical psychology. Angela previously worked as a psychotherapist for 25 years, helping clients make lifestyle changes for better emotional, mental, and physical well-being. She holds certifications in plant-based nutrition at the Colin Campbell Institute for Nutrition Studies at e-Cornell, as a master vegan lifestyle coach and educator at Main Street Vegan Academy, and as a transformational coach at the Institute for Women-Centered Coaching. Dr. Crawford is passionate about the power of personal transformation to create a more fulfilling, healthy, and purposeful life and a kinder, more sustainable world. So welcome, Angela. I'm so excited that you're here.
Me too. So great to be back and to be having this conversation.
Right. And today we're going to be talking about the vegan transformation. It's out. And let us know if you're watching. Let us know if you're watching and if you have a copy or you're going to get a copy. All right, y'all. So I was looking at to see the comments. Let us know who's watching, because I see a couple of y'all are, and maybe more. So, Angela, let's start off with just finding out what started this vegan journey for you.
Okay. So my own personal vegan journey. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it started first with becoming vegetarian. I wish I'd gone right to vegan, but that didn't happen. It started vegetarian. And what led me to stop eating meat was I saw a program on PBS that actually was about workers in a meat processing plant. And it showed that they were having all these injuries because of the type of work they were doing, and didn't show any gory details, but it showed enough that it got me thinking about, for the first time really, about how my food got to me. Before that, I just believed what many of us believe, that I needed to eat meat or dairy to survive. I grew up in the Midwest. This was just impressed on me my whole life, as it is for many of us. But when I saw that program, it just got me thinking, like, I don't know if I like what's happening here. And then I thought, well, if you don't like how the workers are being treated, what do you think about what happens to the animals? And it was just like, I don't know, a mind-changing moment. And the very next day, I went and bought a plant-based cookbook, because I thought, I want to at least look into, I don't want to eat this way anymore. I want to look into other options. And I tried my first recipe. It went beautifully. I had never liked cooking. And before, I'd always thought, like, I don't know what a vegan or vegetarian would eat. How do they do that? But suddenly, after seeing that program, it just got me wanting to figure this out, and determined really to. And so I just kept reading. I kept learning. I learned about how animals are treated in animal agriculture. And just the more I learned, I knew I didn't want to contribute I learned other aspects like the impact on the environment and our health too. And those things certainly helped. It's sort of like a win-win-win, decision. So over time, I moved to, first vegetarian, and then over time became vegan. It took a little while to fully embrace that vegan thing, I think, because of the social aspects of how to navigate those situations. But as I kept learning more and more, it's like it broke through this disconnect that I think so many of us are wired with, and conditioned into. Finally, that disconnect, broke through, and that compassionate person I am really, I don't know, connected with all the animals in the different systems, like the food system and the different exploitive industries. And I just became vegan in 2019. And then that just led to a whole bunch of other things, because once I became vegan, it just became a deep sense of purpose to want to share the power of this lifestyle for every reason, most of all for the animals. But it also seems to be the solution to many other challenging things that we're facing as humanity right now. And so just wanting to invite people on this path, and to also realize that it's joyful and fulfilling, not, even though there can be pain that comes with realizing all this stuff, there's also so many benefits, in so many ways, and wanting to share those benefits.
Right. And it's very interesting, the path. I mean, realizing that the slaughterhouse workers, I mean, having compassion for them is usually not what I hear about.
Yeah.
Most, in fact, someone just told me how they hated them. So just the other day. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, how do you get to that point where we can have compassion for the drivers of the trucks or the people that work in those places? I mean, how can we live without hating them?
It's a really good question. I think for me, when I first learned about the workers, I was at a stage where I had been working with injured workers from other industries. So I think that, and because I was a psychotherapist, I'd seen the worst of things that could happen to human beings. And so, not all of us have as much choice or options as others. Some people are raised in situations with childhood abuse, or they're raised in situations with less economic opportunity, like some immigrants, or people of different minorities, or people lower socioeconomic class. So sometimes, in my work as a therapist, I realize, we're not all brought up in equivalent situations, that sometimes we have different systemic, societal, and family situations that affect us. And so I think that led me to be compassionate for the workers, because I knew sometimes when workers are in oppressive working situations and they're treated horribly and have injuries, they don't always have a lot of voice. So that was my introduction to that. And then as I learned more about what happened to the animals, and how sometimes, the workers can be incredibly abusive to the animals, it is easy to be angry, and I can understand that totally. And I don't fully have an answer, other than, from what I've learned, probably a vast majority of people that work in these settings have socioeconomic or other issues that make them not feel they have as many choices for jobs. And I think if we think of most of us, even before we became vegan, that is the last place we'd want to work, right? There's a saying about, if Paul McCartney supposedly said if slaughterhouses had glass windows, we'd all be vegetarian. Maybe that's not true, but most of us don't want to look at that, much less be the one doing it. So I think that people that work in those settings, sometimes they feel they have few other choices. Whether they do or not, I don't know, but many are in a much more difficult situation than I am. And then once they're in there, they learn to desensitize. I mean, how can you work there if you don't? So I think in many cases, like, I guess for me personally, if I'm going to be angry, I'm going to be angry at the corporations that actually gain all the profits from this, and probably exploit the workers and the people that live near these plants, who have to have the contamination from it. I mean, it's like, maybe the workers are not the ones so much, even though we might not like what's happening there. Maybe it's the bigger system that even makes this happen in the first place. That's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, very true. And then people trapped in that system, and it's very easy to say, well, they can go get another job. But I know how hard it is to find a job. I mean, it's not always so easy just to get another job. And also, those jobs pay a lot of money. And it's just very sad, that cycle of being trapped in there. If you're providing for a family and this job makes so much money, and you have to, exactly like you said, desensitize, which is tremendously sad because it affects every part of your life. You can't just cut off your emotions in this part of your life
Yeah.
and expect to be living an emotional life. I mean, because
Yeah.
you could speak more on that.
There are definitely like higher rates of substance abuse, domestic violence, and other things in workers in meat processing plants, especially the workers that are in those earlier stages in the process, who are like maybe stunning the animal or doing some of the other more difficult parts of this whole, and my heart breaks. And I just think, well, I think we're all hurting to see what happens to animals. And sometimes we want someone to blame, and maybe the workers are convenient to blame. But, before I became vegetarian or vegan, I was essentially paying these workers to do what I would never have done, without realizing I was doing that. And I think so all of us realizing we're all, most of us weren't born vegetarian or vegan. And so we've all at some point in our life, without knowing it, paid into an oppressive system so that we could have what we thought we needed, meat or dairy, because we've been all of us raised to believe that. So we're all part of kind of a system of cultural conditioning of, big corporations that want to make money, and do what they need to send this message that we all need this. Think of all the marketing messages we get about milk or meat and just, so I think it's just so much more complex. Like we want a simple person to blame to make us feel better. And yet these workers wouldn't be in this industry if we had a whole different system in place societally, with better ways to like provide food for all human beings and that are compassionate and kind and sustainable.
Right. And if we weren't under that myth of that we have to eat this way,
Exactly.
Living under that and just being targeted every minute with all these different billboards and commercials saying we have to do this, or we're not going to be strong, we're going to be weak. And so, it's very sad. You're right. It is a big system here. And so everyone suffers.
It's so true. And I think when I first, went vegetarian and then went vegan, there was a part of me that thought like, well, now that I get it, you think if you just share it with people, they'll get it. And I think that's where sometimes we have the frustration and sadness, is that for all these reasons that we're just talking about, all the cultural conditioning, all the beliefs we've been raised with, all the authority figures that tell us this, it's a big block to break through, to realize, hey, not only do I not have to eat animals, I can actually be better off, as well as just being compassionate and kind and aligned with my values. It's freeing once we break through, but it is a breakthrough that has to happen.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It is a breakthrough. You've got to really question everything you've been taught and start looking at what's really going on.
Yeah.
So what would you tell someone that's turned vegan and has really tried to share the news with her family or his family, their family, and they're hitting up against a wall or they're being made fun of and they feel depressed at night? What would you say to that person?
Yeah. Gosh, there's a lot of parts to that. So, so one, and it depends on where you're at in your stage of this whole change process. A lot of times in the early stages of being vegan, we really need to kind of care for ourselves in a different way, until this becomes more solid. And so in the earlier stages, especially, we might need to really build our support network of other vegans so that we don't feel totally isolated and we can learn from the others that are already further along on this path and just have a lot of support as we're learning how to navigate this lifestyle. Because in the beginning, it's almost like learning a new language. You're learning how to eat differently. You're learning how to buy different products. You're learning how to cope with the emotions that come up, that, you're aware of certain things that the rest of society is not aware of. You're having to be used to being sort of a minority in situations where you weren't before, like social situations. And how do I navigate these? So in the beginning, I'd say first, just let yourself have a lot of support for yourself to let this get more solid, and just learn to navigate some different parts of it. It's normal. We want to inspire our loved ones. And I will just say that sometimes our family are the hardest ones, I mean, sometimes they might come along with us. I've certainly known people that they've shared it with their family and their family has changed, but that's probably not the norm. I'd say I hear from more people that either my family just doesn't want to hear it, or they're not supportive, or they tell me don't ruin the meal, or why won't you eat what grandmother made, or why are you ruining Christmas or Thanksgiving? So, I mean, these things can all happen because our families have been raised to believe certain things too, just as we once did. And sometimes our families might equate food with love, and so if we're not suddenly doing what we had done before, they feel, I mean, maybe a lot of different feelings. They might make them start to question themselves a little bit and not want to question it, or they might feel that you're rejecting them in some way. There can be a lot of different feelings. So I think sometimes we have to kind of realize, okay, if we're trying to influence someone to change and they're not open, sometimes that's when we got to step back from trying to change them. Put our energy more towards people that are more in the contemplation stage of change in our life, that might actually be curious or interested in the change. Put our energy towards that. The people that are like what I'd call pre-contemplation, where I'm not open to change. I don't want to hear this. Sometimes it's just more about how do we stay connected if there's someone we love, and want to stay connected to in different ways, because you never know how you might plant seeds over time. But if you try to push someone that's not open, then that sometimes works against you. And so sometimes it's like asking them to be your ally while you're being vegan, so that at least they're not undermining you. So there's a lot to say here, and so we can probably unpack some of this in more depth. But those are some initial thoughts.
Yes, there's a lot to unpack, and we don't have hours and hours, and hours. So let's get back to the vegan transformation. So what led you to write the vegan transformation?
Well, when I became vegan, I had a lot of inner changes that came with that. I have always been sort of an introverted person and kind of, shy in certain social situations. And yet when I became vegan, it's like I found myself wanting to share about it in some way. We're all different in how we share our gifts. I'm not going to be the most vocal person at a gathering, shouting about it. For me, it's more about teaching and inspiring. And that's just how my personality works. That's, I've for many years have helped people through all kinds of life stuff. And so, I can gently challenge people, but I'm always about trying to keep a connection or a relationship, because I figure I'm going to have more influence in a relationship than I am if I totally cut off a relationship. So for me, it was about sharing the positives of this lifestyle, because I knew a lot of spiritual people. I was part of, like you, we were both part of this Feminine Power coaching program, the Institute for Women-Centered Coaching. And, many of the people I met there and in my profession were very spiritual, compassionate people, and yet they hadn't connected yet with veganism. And when I would hear people talk about it, it seemed like people saw it as so restrictive, or just hadn't made the connection that I had finally made. And so, and as I got to know vegans, I actually saw that for most of us, it isn't restrictive, even though, there can be sadness as we realize what's happening to animals. There's also fulfillment. There's also a sense of purpose. There's also a sense of authenticity. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right, but I wasn't ignoring it before. And now I'm living aligned with my truest values. Well, there's a peace that comes with that for many people. And I wanted to share the kind of inner transformation that unfolds when we go on a vegan path. There's been a lot about the ethics. There's been a lot about even the health benefits of going plant-based or vegan, but there wasn't as much out there about, well, what happens psychologically and spiritually. And so it led me to do interviews and surveys with vegans, and the Vegan Transformation shares 7 core transformations that the people I surveyed and interviewed reported on their vegan path, different ways that they had changed psychologically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. And it doesn't mean it's all positive. There are ups and downs, but for me, it's overall positive in that it's a healthier, more authentic way to live that includes both ourselves and the world, and because we're all interconnected. It's caring for us, and it's caring for all sentient beings in a way that doesn't have to exclude anything really, because being kind to ourselves can ultimately be what's being kind to the world if we're vegan.
Right.
So,
Well, you said it when you said we're all interconnected.
yeah, we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the interesting things that came through my interviews and surveys. This was one, I had a questionnaire that people filled out about how their life had changed in terms of the emotional aspects, both the positives and the challenges. And I also had some open-ended questions where people could share it in their own words. And one thing that kept coming up that I hadn't really expected was people would say things like, I realize I'm interconnected with all sentient beings in a way I had never fully realized before. I can give you a few examples. Like, I feel more spiritual now that I don't have to take a life to live a life. I now feel that I'm connected to my higher self and to all living beings, and that we are all part of God's creation. We are one energy. We are all one. I'm at peace knowing that I no longer contribute to the suffering of other beings in the environment. And there were just a lot of quotes like that that people shared about how they now realized an interconnectedness with nature and sentient beings that I think when they were eating animals had been somewhat cut off, because, as long as we feel we need to eat them and we're not like letting ourselves feel for them and with them, there's this disconnect. And it seems like something about eating plants, eating lighter, not eating animals, and awakening to what's happening in the world, it just opened up a lot of realizations for people that sometimes were deeply spiritual.
Yeah, that's very true, because if we're eating animals, we don't want to acknowledge them as in the way that if we're vegan, the way we can acknowledge them, because that's it's a conflict right here. If we're eating them, then
then you have to disconnect or dissociate or compartmentalize, use all these different defense mechanisms to not feel. We humans do that. It's a human way of coping with cognitive dissonance. Basically, when we're acting out of alignment with our values, we have different ways that our minds try to cope to not feel that discomfort. It's usually not conscious either. It's usually just something we do unconsciously.
Right.
But once you realize, wow, I cannot eat animals, and on top of that, I can actually thrive with this way of being, it opens up all kinds of doors. And you realize that when something else in the world is suffering, in some ways that suffering comes back to you. And, it's all so connected.
Exactly. It does come back to us. And we got your fans here.
So I see we got JJ here. That's awesome. Oh, yay. Well, thank you for sharing about the book. That's awesome. And we're so glad you're here.
JJ is wonderful. And that's Vegan Knowledge JJ. She's on YouTube. I don't know who else is watching, but I see that other people are watching. Let us know if you have any questions, any comments. So what were the key findings then in the book?
Yeah, well, there was, 7 core themes that really came through the interviews and surveys. And so, and I'll just say them briefly, then maybe we can elaborate on 1 or 2 of them. It's too much to go into all of them in detail, but the 7 themes were values alignment. And that was the most prominent one. I'm finally really living aligned with my deepest values. Compassion, expanding our compassion and our circle of compassion to all sentient beings. Meaning and purpose, that there's a deeper meaning and purpose. Authentic fulfillment, feeling fulfilled because we're living true to ourselves. It doesn't mean being happy all the time, but it's this truer form of fulfillment that incorporates all feelings, including the more tough ones. connection, meaningful connection with like-hearted people, and empowerment, and particularly empowerment over health, because some of the people I interviewed had changed because of compassion for animals, but still found themselves healing physically because they were no longer eating foods that were toxic for their body. And then the final one was this spiritual deepening and this sense of interconnectedness that I was just describing to you a moment ago. So it's just kind of cool to just see all these things, or things that, positive psychology views all of these as very positive. And these were common themes that came up for many, many vegans on this vegan journey, things that we want to experience to have a more true life. And these unfold often as we follow the vegan path.
Yeah, it's definitely a transformation. So I'm glad that you put, that your title fits exactly.
Yeah.
And I see we've got Dina here.
Yay. Hi, Dina.
Thanks for joining us. And here's JJ's. She says the biggest in-depth research found that vegan knowledge JJ was the coolest vegan.
Oh, cool. I love that.
Anyway, she said she's kidding, that she loved the 7 core values, and the wild thing is that she felt all of the same emotions as others in the book.
And then she mentioned spiritually, I feel so different, down at the bottom there. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. So in the book, like, I share these themes and why they matter, for us and for how we affect the world. Because I do believe as we transform inside, then we can be, I guess, the biggest influence on the world that is possible. Because as we're more fulfilled or more true to ourselves in the deepest way, then we can have ripple effects for helping others on the same journey and spreading compassion that hopefully will shift, the systems that you and I were talking about earlier to some kind of tipping point, that things are different, that compassion for all sentient beings becomes the norm, Yeah. So in the chapters, I share why these themes matter, and then share examples from the people I interviewed of how this came up for them, so that, if you're vegan and reading the book, you can see, like, I'm not alone, and maybe even recognize things in yourself that, you've also experienced, but you had never named, The more fulfilled and healthy we can be as vegans, I think the greater ripple effect we're going to have for animals.
Well, how can people keep from getting triggered?
Well, I don't know if we can keep from getting triggered.
Okay, so then getting triggered, we accept it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think, first of all, as human beings, we get triggered. So how many of us, we all have buttons that get pushed just in relationships and in life. But then when you're aware of animal suffering and there are things that happen that bring that up, it's normal, I think, to feel triggered. I think it's more how we cope with that. How do we cope with the triggers in our life? And there's a continuum there. Like, some people might be mildly triggered and it just kind of upsets you, but you can kind of cope with it and move forward. And then there might be a whole other level that would be full-blown, perhaps post-traumatic stress, or a more severe form of what Claire Mann calls dystopia, where it's just really hard to kind of come back from those triggers. So I think maybe it'd be first to be like, okay, how much is it affecting me? And then sometimes we might, if it's the more severe end, we might need help. We might need a therapist. We might need a coach. We might need a support group, there are different things like that out there. In defense of animals, they have a great resource section for vegan activists, including therapists who are sensitive to vegan issues. Claire Mann leads a lot of Vistopia masterclasses. So there's a lot of resources out there for when we need a little more support. But if it's not quite to that extreme, like it bothers you, I think it's like just realizing that we have to include self-care on this journey, and having tools for that, tools to bring balance and tools to self-regulate, because it's normal to be upset when we know about suffering and abuse and harm, you know. So it's not that it's bad that we feel that, it's just that we need tools that help, one, to just every day keep us in a little better emotional level, and then secondly, tools that we can use when we do get those triggers. How do we kind of self-regulate and kind of bring ourselves to a place where we can use wise action to figure out what to do about it versus just reaction.
Right. You're right. Because we know it's coming. Once we know that the triggers are coming, then we can, I mean, the better we know ourselves, then we can put into practice the self-regulation. How am I going to be ready for this? How can I self-soothe when it happens?
Yeah. Yeah, like I would think like maybe a couple of things to think about. First of all, we humans are animals too. And just like any animals, there's limits and needs that we have to thrive. And so, you know, and I want to acknowledge some of the comments. I'll say
Yeah.
more about that, but let's acknowledge a couple of the comments in their thing, and then I'll go on with that in a second.
Let me see. I don't think I've shown this one. The way you presented it as research, did you not show this one? But really did a great job in making it truly interesting story and share real life examples. I would recommend this to both new vegans and experienced vegans. That's JJ.
Yeah.
And then we've got Dina, who's a minister. I have to jump. I'm at a ministry conference and the only vegan.
Oh, that's so hard. Oh,
I know
yeah.
it's super hard to be with spiritual people who aren't vegan. I know. I feel Dina's heart. She has such a beautiful heart, and it is hard. And here, look at this. But I'm planting seeds. I appreciate your work so much.
Well, thank you, Dina, for joining us. Even, you know, and may your seeds, you know, bear more fruit than you even think, you know, over time. There was a great quote that I shared in my book from John Oberg, you know, who is a vegan activist. And he said something about, and I think I got it from his Instagram. He said something along the lines, there will come a day where everybody is going to say, like, you know, that not eating animals is the norm. And they'll say, I can't believe we used to eat animals, you know? So we just have to kind of realize that even though it seems slower than we'd like, we are forerunners for what is going to be recognized as truth, you know, someday.
That is true. I mean, we're very courageous to stand up. You know, it was funny because at church, I was talking to Reverend Richard about the lay leader position that I'm applying for. And he was like, are you able to stand up in front of a group of 20 or 30 people and with an opposite thought, you know, and something that's different from something else, everyone else there? And I said, I'm vegan. I had my vegan shirt on. And I said, yes, I can.
Yes. Yes.
So he said, well, take that vegan energy, right, to spread this love. And that's what veganism is also. Yeah, of course. I mean, this love, it's this, when we have more compassion and love, then the animals will be spared because we won't be seeing them as others. We'll see the connectedness of the world.
Yes. Yeah. And so as Dina says, amen to that, we're early adopters. So true. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yes. And then JJ saying, right. I love that, Dr. Angela. I know that day is coming too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're all working hard. Every one of us. I mean, when we're shopping, people see what we're buying. I mean, I know people notice my grocery cart.
Yes, yeah. That's so funny. You say that. I was in the vegan kind of section. It wasn't fully vegan, but it's where the tofu was and just that sort of thing. And someone came up to me and said, are you vegan? And they like wanted help with like choosing certain products because they had just recently gone vegan and they weren't fully sure about certain things. And I was just like, wow, so cool. You know, you never know. Yeah. You just never know. And, you know, so in terms of the self-care piece, I think, you know, again, realizing we too are sentient beings that have limits, whether we like it or not, we do, you know, again, having been a therapist, I've seen people who push past their limits and there's a price to pay, whether it be health-wise or psychologically or, you know, otherwise. So we need to have practices that help take care of ourselves so that we can show up for what, our activism or our advocacy or whatever kind of thing we're doing, there's the seed planting that we're trying to do. So just first having daily practices like getting enough sleep, getting healthy nutrition. So that might include some whole fruits and veggies in there, to get the antioxidants that science shows actually helps our brain and our gut microbiome. So if we're have the good nutrition foundation, it's going to help us navigate the emotions better that are going to come up. And then having a good support system, having practices like meditation or yoga or time in nature or other things that kind of calm us. All that gives a good foundation so that when we do have the triggers come up or the stressful situations come up, whether it's someone's comments or whether it's seeing something that's disturbing, that kind of grounds us. And then having practices we can call on when we are upset. And it's going to be different for different people. Some people, it might be like talking to a really good friend will be the thing that helps in that moment. For someone else, it might be doing some deep breathing techniques to just kind of calm the nervous system. For some, it might be picturing the compassionate vegan world that we're working towards and just remembering that even though it's not here now, this is where we're moving. It could be just a timeout for a little bit to just, take a walk or something until your nervous system can recalibrate. And there's a lot of different tools too that can kind of calm emotions, like from emotional freedom technique, which would take too much time to describe, but it's something where you can Google it and there's videos and things. The loving kindness meditation, there's a lot of guided versions of that can kind of calm our nervous system too. So just having tools, and we'll think more clearly when the nervous system is back re-regulated again. And then we can figure out, okay, what do I do with this? Is there an action I need to take or do I just have to accept that I don't have as much control over the world as I'd like to have, but I can only do my part. And what's my part?
Right. What's my part? That's the main thing.
Yeah, I can't do everything. I can't fix everything. As an empath, like I felt that first as a therapist for my clients that were suffering. And then when I woke to what was happening to animals, I felt it for the animals. And yet realizing like I can feel for them, and yet I can't fix everything. I don't have that much power. And so what is my part? I can only do my part. If I'm burned out, I'm not going to do any part. If I, care for myself, I can at least contribute from my gifts, which are going to be different than someone else's gifts, very different. And so for me, that's come through as things like teaching and writing and both with pre-vegans, helping them move on the path and see the benefits of this lifestyle. And then for those already vegan, to include self-care, because if we're not including that, I think we'll get burned out more easily and we won't be as effective, with our gifts. So those are some, and other people are going to have different gifts that they bring than mine. You have your gifts, and JJ and Dina each have theirs, and others that are listening have their own gifts and their own personalities and ways to bring this message forward.
Well, that's very true. We all have our own gifts to bring to the table, and we can bring gifts, and maybe we don't know what they are, and that would be time to sit quietly or even ask other people, what do you see my gifts?
Yeah, definitely. A couple of the chapters that relate to what you're saying. So one, there's a chapter on meaning and purpose, and in it I share different expressions of purpose that the people I interviewed expressed, and so there were all different ways that people express vegan purpose. Some did it through more of the human health aspect of veganism, because sometimes that's the way people enter the door, is because of health reasons. And what I found in interviewing people, some of the ones that I interviewed who became vegan more to heal from disease, many of them, and this doesn't always happen, but it can happen, many of them had awakened then to animal compassion, because again, once they weren't eating animals and realized that they could survive and thrive without them, suddenly that block, that cognitive dissonance was not there, and they could now look at what actually happens in animal agriculture, and their compassion opened up. So I think like sometimes as vegans, we can not appreciate the different pathways people come into this. And honestly, whatever way someone comes into it, they're still helping animals, you know? And so many that, yeah, started for one reason actually found all the other reasons once they came in the door.
My gosh, yes. If they just simply want to eat plants for health, it doesn't matter. Do it. I mean, I mean, we have to celebrate any entry,
Yes.
however it is. I mean, I know people that have said, well, I was just doing an experiment, and it was more like the more data driven experiment. And now that person is very compassionate towards the animals. That was the road in. So when we hold judgment against people, I mean, that's never going to work in any situation at all. We can't thrive with judgment.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and then other people, you know, they work through animal advocacy, others the environment, others food equity, because, you know, food, not all of us have access to healthy foods. Some try to build community. Some offer vegan services like business coaching and things like that. There was some go in the fitness thing, you know, like our good friend Jeff Palmer, who shows through his fitness that, hey, you can be vegan and be fit, you know, which is a big fear for a lot of, especially men, you know, as kind of, am I going to get weak or whatever? No, like Jeff Palmer and Robert Cheek and others show us that you can be incredibly strong, you know, with plant-powered living. So yeah, I think embracing whatever door people enter, even if it's not the door we came through. And, you know, I've come to realize too, that I think veganism, we're in a different stage than we were when veganism was first coined as a term back, that was like in the 1940s, which, you know, it is specifically about lessening our exploitation and harm to animals. And over time, things have changed where our environment is now at a huge crisis that it was not then. And if our environment and our, you know, planet and climate change worsen, that hurts animals too. We won't even, you know, maybe have sentient beings here at all if we keep doing what we're doing to the planet. And then the human health crisis has expanded since then too, where like now, because we eat this Western diet, there's more health issues than ever before, more people dying of different diseases that often are lifestyle related. So I think like the reasons to become vegan have expanded over time, that even though at its core, it's about not harming animals, if humans are dying of diseases that they could heal if lifestyle was changed in many cases, and if the planet is also being destroyed, it seems to me it all ends up being so interconnected now. It's now becoming harder to separate the different reasons for being vegan, because they all affect one another in some way. How we treat animals is affecting the planet and, you know, and human health. And so it all kind of comes back together.
It really does. And it's hard to sometimes get people to understand that. I mean, so what do you think were your most surprising findings in your research?
Well, I think one thing that surprised me maybe was how important it is and how helpful it is when we align with our values. Like, I don't hear like in everyday conversations, people talk about values as much as you know, I don't know. I just don't hear it a lot. We're like, oh, are you aligned with your values? You know, I just don't hear like people talking about values. And certainly it seems like when you see public figures these days, like sometimes you wonder, does anybody live aligned with real ethics or values? You know, sometimes you wonder. Obviously there are, and obviously the people that are really living their values are often not the ones featured on, you know, the news or the TV programs we're seeing. But I was surprised by how much values really matter in our mental health and our thriving. And, you know, because the biggest thing people said to me when I asked them, well, what's the most positive emotional benefit of going vegan for you? that I'm now living in line with my truest values and convictions. That was the thing that more people said than anything else. And it made me think about how, like when something bothers us, whether it's something we've done or something someone else has done, usually it's because it's stepping on our values in some way. But we don't always stop to name our values, what our values are. And so at any rate, our values are a key driver of, what matters to us, being our true selves, living a life we can be proud of. So I guess I would just invite people to kind of realize, that values matter, that sometimes we dismiss our values or don't think about what they are, but actually it's worthwhile to slow down and think about what are our values and in what ways am I living in alignment with them and in what ways am I not living in alignment with them.
Right. And yes, and that's very important, living in alignment with our values. And for me, veganism is about love for all, and it's not about judgment. It's not about forcing. It's about loving for all. And it's not up to me to force people into moving forward or faster than they're ready. My duty is to be a kind light and to allow people to move when they're ready. Now, I have a wonderful friend, Ellen, and she watched her brother be vegan. He didn't say anything. She just watched, and she became vegan. Now, no, he allowed her to go at her own pace, and now she's doing so much. So we have to be compassionate to people. I mean, if we don't, we're sabotaging ourselves. We're sabotaging the mission of it. When we become judgmental, now I'm going on a soapbox. When we become judgmental, we've just shut everyone else down. And when we say you have to do it this way, then forget it. Nobody wants to be forced into doing things the way that I say you have to do them. How would I know what's best for someone else? That's not up to me. And it's not living in alignment with who I am. Who I am is to allow people to live in peace and to be a voice to share this message. It's not to force things down people's throats. So there's my 2 cents.
Well, and having worked with people for all those years in therapy, I never knew anybody that changed because of judgment. Change always happened when someone felt an inner calling. Now, sometimes someone might challenge someone a bit and get them thinking, but it always then was their own inner path. Because we can't change if we're not committed to change, because we're the one that actually has to live that change. So you're right. It's sometimes hard to prescribe for someone else how they should change, but we can be role models, and we can awaken in people their own desire for change. And we can support them in whatever path of change they go on. Some people change overnight and other people don't. Some people, it's a process. I know we all wish it would be a vegan world today. But I kind of keep looking. Right now, veganism is still only about maybe 3% of the global population, maybe less. Well, why is that? And how do we help? How do we be part of the change we want to see? And sometimes that might mean starting with the people that are ripe for change, because there are people that are open and ready. And so it might be starting with them, so that as we build more and more momentum, there is a tipping point.
Right. And I mean, I'll just be very transparent here. I was vegetarian, vegan, and I fell off the wagon. I mean, I suffered with a lot of emotional eating, a lot of just things, feeling horrible and depressed and sad. So it was easier for me to go get something that was vegetarian than vegan. And when I was overwhelmed with emotions of sadness, of, broken relationships, that was the cognitive. I'm just going to put that in a box. I'm barely surviving myself. Let me get this piece of cake because I don't know how I'm going to go on. And so Yes, I mean, I went back and forth, and now I'm fully vegan, and thank God that it's easy to get, and I know how to make things. I mean, I know how to cook now, and I know how to take care of myself. But yes, did that mean I was a bad person? Did that mean that I wasn't ever vegan? No, it means that I'm a human being who struggled with powerful emotions that caused me to fall off the wagon. You know, I may feel like I'm going to cry right now, but I mean, to have compassion for myself. I'm not perfect, and I don't want to be, and I never was perfect. So I do the best I can. So I extend that judgment to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you're naming something. A lot of people struggle in ways that we may not always recognize, like emotional struggles, as you're naming, food, kind of comfort eating patterns that we develop from early on. I had that myself before I went on this path of vegetarian and vegan, a lot of comfort eating. And just, I think there's a lot of different factors. And, I just kind of I'm just aware, like in my head, what I'm aware of right now is that when we feel judged or shamed, our self-protection systems come up, and then we're not open to change at all. So I'm just thinking, this is, I think, one of the challenges for us as vegans is that if we think that someone else will change because we shamed or judged them, that's rarely going to happen, because the self-protection system kicks in and we suddenly think we have to do everything in our power to kind of protect ourselves, because shame is the most painful human emotion. When someone says or does something that makes us feel like we're less than, or we're not okay, or we're not good enough, or we're a bad person, rather than making us motivated to change, it moves us into self-protection. And so if we're wanting to encourage change in others, shame is not going to be the path for most people, because it just, think of times you felt shamed. Maybe someone shamed you for your political views or your religious views or some behavior you did. How much did that make you open to that other person or to the change that they were trying to inspire in you? Usually not. But when someone helps, us see that we've all been duped, in a sense, by the systems. We've all been lied to. We've all been conditioned. And we can come with them and say, hey, I once believed that too. I once believed I had to have meat and dairy to survive. I once thought I couldn't live without cheese. I once had emotional eating issues and found it hard to picture how I would give up certain foods. If we can join with them that, yeah, I once felt that too, if we did, or I knew people that felt that way too, and then we kind of share what we've learned that's helped, that's a different way of approaching it, that, hey, we're all human. And I struggle with some of the same things, and this is what I've learned, or this is what's helped me, or this is what I found has helped other people. And it's sort of, it invites them on a journey where, like, they see what's possible. I was thinking of like those seeds that were planted for me before I became first vegetarian and then vegan. I think I had eaten at a conference center a few months before I saw that program about the workers, and the food was delicious. And I think that was a seed planted where, like, I never knew what someone would eat that was vegetarian or vegan, but wow, this could be possible. So I think it made me more open when I saw that program to the possibility of change. My stepdaughter came home from college and she didn't eat meat at Thanksgiving because she had gone vegetarian. And it just, again, got me thinking, like, So it opened doors to possibilities that I hadn't seen there before, because sometimes we just don't even see it. We're so societally conditioned, it doesn't even seem possible. Everybody asks me, where do you get your protein? And they're serious. So they don't even, to us who are vegan, we know that this is ridiculous, that every food, most foods have protein, and we're not dying of protein deficiency. But people have gotten so conditioned and heard this so much, they genuinely don't know.
I know, you're right. It is very funny. And a lot of people, I mean, we can fall in the trap of looking at the world in black and white. This is the way to do it, and this is not. But the world isn't like that. There's many shades of gray.
Yes. So coming back to values, one of my values is compassion. And so compassion for the sentient beings has been opened up by being vegan. But I'm not truly being compassionate if I then close compassion to the human beings who haven't yet awakened to that same realization. So how do I include them in my circle of compassion, even if I don't agree or like what everybody is doing? And there's many layers of that. I do think the loving kindness meditation is a great tool because it invites us to extend compassion to ourselves first, and then to those we love, and then to those we're concerned about, and then to include those that we don't like so much, and the saying for the ones that we have challenges with is, just as I want to be peaceful, may you be peaceful. Just as I want to be filled with loving kindness, may you be filled with loving kindness. Just as I want to be free from suffering, may you be free from suffering. And then we extend it to all beings, may all beings everywhere be happy, peaceful, and free. There's a meditation on my website with that for that, if anybody is interested. If you go to angelacrawfordphd.com, under resources, there's a meditation tab, and some of the meditations that go with the book are there, if anybody's interested. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, that is a very good way to ground. And please, y'all, if you're watching, please like us, subscribe, and then also go to www.all-creatures.org to make a donation or a recurring donation. We really would appreciate that. And I'd like to get some final thoughts from you, Angela. And again, let everyone know where they can find you and they can get this wonderful book that has so much depth. And I mean, it's just profoundly touching.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And, one of our fellow graduates from Main Street Vegan Academy had said to me, like, this is the best advocacy tool, because she found it very uplifting as a way to share the vegan message with others, because it is written in a non-judgmental way to invite the person in wherever they are on their journey. I think I was thinking of myself, 18 years ago before I started the path. So people can buy the book anywhere, whether it be any of the major booksellers. It is available also in audiobook on, I think, Amazon only, but it's also available in ebook or paperback at all major booksellers. And my website is angelacrawfordphd.com, and it has, different resources on that website, as well as links to my social media under the contact tab. And, just please do check out the book. I have had friends who are not vegan who have read it and have said, a couple of them actually went vegan. Others, I said they're thinking about things that they hadn't realized before. So, and those who are already vegan, just, I think, supporting our journey, because the more inspired and self-care that we include, I think the more lasting we'll be on this path and having the greater impact in planting seeds. Yeah.
Well, I'm very inspired, as always, by you, Angela. You always have a very peaceful, compassionate way of looking at every living being in this world. And that's truly very rare. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thanks so much for having me here and for the work that you all do. I just have so much appreciation for everybody, the way they share compassion for all sentient beings, and the different ways people use their advocacy to help. So.
Right. It all matters. So thank you, JJ, and everyone who's watching, Dina, for your kind comments, all those beautiful comments that came in. I really appreciate it. And everybody behind the scenes, thank you all for what you're doing, and make sure that you get your copy again of the Vegan Transformation. And Angela, you'll have to come back again. And I just love having you on here. You are such a peaceful, beautiful spirit. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.